Syria.
Yes, or more specifically, actually, with a report in Foreign Policy from Syrian refugee camps in Turkey. Now, their correspondent there says that for months Turkey has been allowing people to come and go across the border quite easily, whether they're refugees or whether they're supplying arms to the Free Syrian Army. But now they're starting to clamp down. They say people in those refugee camps think the Turkish security forces are in some kind of alliance with the Syrian army because they're starting to detain people who are supplying weapons across the border. They're starting to put them into detention camps, and they say unless you've got a permit to move humanitarian aid, they won't let you across the border. Now, the people in those refugee camps aren't only being affected by this clampdown, they also, according to that report, are being riven by sectarian tensions among themselves. Now, the Syrian opposition is fracturing into all kinds of different groups. This is terribly complex, but they say that refugees in that camp have been mocking Colonel Riyad al-Assad, who is living in another refugee camp in Turkey, and says that he's leading the Free Syrian Army from outside the country because they say he's closely linked to the Turkish regime, which, according to them, isn't helping in any way. So they think that he's not the one doing the real fighting. He's just trying to claim the credit. Then they're angry also with the Syrian National Council, who've been most widely recognised, as representing the Syrian opposition abroad, because according to those refugees, they're holding conferences in expensive hotels in Istanbul, while ordinary people there are risking their lives to try and smuggle a few bullets across the border. So there's also the worry that those sectarian and political tensions among the Syrian refugees could spread to the rest of the Turkish population. There's also an Alawite minority in that part of Turkey, and apparently some of them were found last week with crosses painted on their doors, which reminded them of a 1978 massacre of their ethnic group by the Sunni minority. So the situation is fracturing in all kinds of directions.
And it's not only Turkey where the complex divisions in the Syrian opposition are spreading tension, is it?
No, The Guardian reports from refugee camps in Lebanon where the majority Sunni refugees aren't being received by local people because they're Shia. It's only the Sunni people in Lebanon that will agree to take them in and help them. Now, apparently several people were recently killed in clashes between Alawite and Sunni groups in Lebanon itself. So people there are very worried that those old ethnic tensions, of course, that date from the Lebanese civil war could be reignited by the presence of Syrian refugees. The Independent is also having a look at the really complex map of tensions that exist between different elements of the Syrian opposition. They've done a double page profiling 7 different factions in the opposition, which I won't try and explain all to you now because it's so complex. But of course, there's the Syrian National Council that's done most of the talking on the international scene. But now there's at least 2 other political groups who've sprung up. One called the National Coordination Committee, who criticised the SNC, saying they're too close to Islamist parties. And then there's at least 3 other military groups. There's the Free Syrian Army, but also the Free Officers Council and the Syrian Patriotic Group, who all say that they don't agree with one another effectively. The Syrian National Council has launched a military bureau to try and control them all, but they don't recognise its leadership. So as this is complex for us to understand, imagine being an international diplomat and trying to work out who to talk to. It's so complicated.
And it's pretty complicated in Libya as well, divisions there too. What are the papers making of that?
Yes, there's a cartoon in the National that sums it up pretty well. They've got 90% of the Libyan flag driving in one direction on a deep jeep and a tiny corner going off in the other direction, but the corner that's running away has got a petrol pump on it, which kind of sums up the problem because the East that wants to succeed has only 20% of the Libyan population, but 80% of the oil, so it could be a massive economic problem if they do succeed. That paper's editorial says that while the desire for federalism is legitimate and historically well backed up, that part of Libya hasn't been part of the united country for very long, only since 1934. But it's the National Transitional Council's fault for trying to centralise government too much, and the only people they reckon will manage to profit from this are Gaddafi loyalists who are trying to cause chaos so that they can attempt to take back power.
Now, we mentioned this in an earlier press review. It's International Women's Day today. So you're also looking at how women are progressing in certain countries like China.
Yes, the New York Times has got a whole special report from all around the world about women's rights. From China, though, the news isn't necessarily great. They say that under Mao, everyone was told that anything a man could do, a woman could also do. But since China's becoming more capitalist, people are moving backwards to more traditional attitudes, and that means women are being forced to stay in the home. They also report from the UK when they say women are also being forced to stay in the home, not because of traditional attitudes, but because childcare is so expensive and the tax credits that women use to pay for it have been cut by the coalition government. So women there are also being forced to stay at home.
All right, thank you very much, Elena, for looking through the international newspapers. After the break, it'll be time for a business update, and we'll be talking to our technology expert about the latest iPad. Will it help Apple keep its huge lead of the tablet market? Find out after the break in business.